And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see, we have a whopping almost 200 people on the live stream with us. And welcome to Nine Hole Reviews. Today, we are going to get into the traitorous comrade, the 5.56 AK. Is a 5.56 AK a good combination? Is this a thing that was ever intended by the late and the great Mikhail Kalashnikov? And to have us discuss this, we have Vladimir Onokoy, our good friend of the channel and AK expert. Welcome, Vlad.
Thank you very much. And thank you for pronouncing my surname correctly. That's actually, you're probably doing a better job than most Russians.
Well, I don't want to give my background in intelligence gathering away to many of the our Russian friends out there. But yes, we have been friends for quite some time. And man, it has been a hot minute since we've seen each other. And you remember the last time we went on a live stream, you made the prediction that Afghanistan will fall, much like the Russian fall in Afghanistan, and that was eerily correct. So shall we perhaps call you the Kalashnikov Nostradamus?
Well, I think it doesn't really take much brain to predict things like that. I think the world around us right now is sometimes so ridiculous and so obviously flawed that you don't have to be smart to see what's going on. But yeah, it's been a while, and we both had significantly less gray hair back then. So I think it's only Josh who kept his, hair intact. So yeah, but it's good to be back, and thank you very much for having me.
Yep. So, and for everyone out on the live stream, Josh is, in fact, he is with us, but he's taken an approach to help us a little bit on the back end, because none of this is competition or positional related or optimization of shooting skill. No. Today we are talking about hardcore governmental mass issuance machines. And so Josh is going to help us on the back end and running the live stream. So everybody say hi to Josh. And on that note, Vlad, Kalashnikovs in 5.56. Now, the big title that I have right here is Stop Reading It on Reddit. 5.56 NATO AKs work fine. And so that's what we're going to talk about, the 5.56 AK. And right now, right here, you can see, for the keen-eyed viewers out there, you'll see that this AK-100 series doesn't quite look like the 74M that we're all used to seeing, because that magazine is, in fact, a little bit more straight. And the straighter magazine, perhaps, we'll get into. But as any good, I don't know if I should call this a lecture, but discussion, we'll have an agenda to give us a good idea on where and how we are going to talk about this topic. So the myth, 5.56 and 223 and AKs will not work. And of course, we've talked about Vlad, our lovely guest, and we're going to have a bottom line up front. So basically, an initial take, if we were to condense this into one or two lines. We'll go through some case studies on 5.56 AKs. We'll talk about the problems that we've seen in the U.S. market, and the larger question is about the AK system itself. Is this clearly it's a government implementation of weapon system, but does it have a role in the civilian use, in the civilian market? So, and then at the end, we'll go to the Q&A, and that'll be it. Easy peasy. And, yes, that's right. Since we are on multiple platforms right here, we do have to make a disclaimer that we are not selling any weapons. We are not advertising anything. This is an academic discussion on the technical characteristics of the Kalashnikov series rifles. On top of that, you will not see any of us touch any firearms in this. So rest assured, we are keeping the world at peace and safe. And now I hate my life for having to say that. But Vlad, welcome to the channel. And one thing I have to, Josh found this as well. Let's see. Actually, before we get into this, chat, start commenting questions that you have. Josh is on the side monitoring, and he is going to push any interesting comments to the top for us to immediately respond to. So get those typing fingers out. Continue to push. Okay, let's see.
Good one.
The sir knows the AKs. Let's see. All right, so back to it. All right, so as we got into the live stream, Josh had sent over a little bit of a bio that we found online. Vladimir Onokoy is a small arms subject matter expert who worked in 20 different countries as a security contractor, armorer, field analyst, product manager, and consultant. His articles were published in Recoil Magazine, Small Arms Review, Small Arms Defense Journal, Overt Defense, and the CLA Report. Shout out to Miles Vining. He also worked as a historical consultant for movies and weapons history books, namely Vickers Guide Kalashnikov series, Small Arms of World War II, the Soviet Union, and third edition of AK-47, the Grim Reaper. So, Vlad, you have quite the background and quite the understanding on the Kalashnikov, but you're also a now soon-to-be published author with your book.
Yes. So I've been doing a lot of consulting, and finally, actually, Ian McCollum was one of the people who told me, why don't you write a separate book about Yugoslavian AKs? And so now Safar Publishing opened pre-orders for my new book, From Balkans to Babylon, Zastava AKs of Yugoslavia, Serbia, and Iraq. So I was pretty surprised that there were no books about Zastava AKs. And I've, for some reason, every country I worked in, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Pakistan, had a lot of Zastava AKs. And I just kept encountering them again and again and again. And when I was not a kid, but a teenager, I was collecting Serbian uniforms. And, I kind of just thought, like, I'm going to do this little book. And it took me 3 years. I had to learn Serbian to actually study the proper sources and finish the book. So it was quite a journey, and I'm really happy that it's not quite over, but yeah, the book is out there. So if you like Zastavas, maybe that's something you'll be interested in. If you don't like Zastavas, hopefully it's not my last book, but we'll see. Maybe I won't do well on this live stream and decide that instead of writing something about AKs, I'll just probably completely change my field of study. I'll become a field journalist, for example.
No, I look, we aren't focusing on the Yugoslav pattern of rifles. We will talk about them in this live stream. But most certainly, of all of the patterns, I think some of the most interesting off branches have got to be the Chinese and the Yugoslav patterns. Those are the big two. Like if the Kalashnikov tree line was a tree trunk, those are the biggest two tree trunks that come off to the side. And maybe once you're done with the Yugoslav pattern, you and I can work on the Chinese pattern. That would be fun.
We'll talk about that. I think we're a little late to the party, but we can still try to do something.
All right. So if you guys are interested, there is a pre-order link that should be in the comments. It should be on the chat. It is right here on the screen. You don't have to use a pre-order link, of course, but if you do, then that helps us out as a channel a little bit. But mostly, we wanted to talk about some of these pretty awesome developments that Vlad is putting out there. Oh, hey, look. Safar Publishing is here. It's great to see them,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Thank
cynical
you,
as
Vlad.
always.
Hmm. Yeah, there will be so many pictures. It was kind of, I thought that there's not enough pictures, and then once we did the layout, I realized there are too many pictures. So that was yeah. So if you can't read or you don't know English, I guess there'll still be something interesting there.
Now
Anyway,
on the pictures though, I thought it was interesting because so Vlad, when he's worked around the world as an armorer, and you have worked around the world as an armorer, specifically on the AK pattern stuff, uh, you were able to collect a lot of interesting photos from places like Africa, certain places in the Middle East, certain other places around the world that we may or may not know about. And you're able to basically have this personal personal it's like we went back in time and sent you to these weird places that had Kalashnikovs, and you just went and did your Russian spy thing and gathered all the information to publish nowadays. And so a lot of these images, from my understanding, is also coming out of your little personal research library of a cell phone and device that you had when you were an armor.
yes, and actually, there is this wonderful sketch somewhere on the internet that I'm sure a lot of people watched, like the dad finding this little piece of wood that he kept for 20 years to actually fix something in the house. So that's what happens with me, because like we're writing the book and I'm like, oh, there is this picture from 14 years ago I can finally use. Oh, there is this picture I took 20 years ago that I can finally use in the book, and it's so great. I mean, so yeah, there are a lot of photos there. So the photos you're seeing right now, this is actually work of Safar Publishing photographers, but a lot of this stuff is kind of like this battlefield photography, the photos I took in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia, some other places. So yeah, hopefully people will like it. But let's get to 5.56 AKs.
Well, okay, before that though, this comment has to be answered. Vlad, what is your favorite caliber?
I guess my answer will be disappointing, because American gun owners have this incredible opportunity that nobody else has. So, for example, I started shooting rifles. It was 7.62 AK. Then I was trained to shoot rifles, and it was a 5.56 AR-15. Then I had to train people, and it was just 5.45 and nothing else. Then I go work in maritime security, and I get a 7.62 VZ-58 that I never held in my hands. And like, I don't have a caliber preference. I'm just happy to have a gun.
Spoken like a true user of the platform. And honestly, this is related to this conversation because calibers may not mean as much to mass issuance, in my opinion. And this is coming from the ordnance side. I think it means more to people who have an option, and how bourgeois of you to think that you have an option in choosing your caliber. All right. So let's get into it. This is the meat, right? AKs in 223 or 5.56 don't work well, or at least this is the myth. And a lot of times I've seen that people boil this down to the lack of magazine standardization and the fact that 5.56 is a caliber, and this is what people are saying. 5.56 is a caliber that is unsuitable to be chambered in the AK in the first place because it doesn't have a steep enough tapered wall. Now, part of this, I've seen a lot of these comments on. It's how people do research nowadays. You pull up the AI overview, as you see on the right side, and the entire thing is quoting people out of Reddit. And I'm not saying there isn't good information on Reddit. I'm saying it's the wild west of information on Reddit, and you don't know where the information's actually coming from. So have you heard of these myths about 5.56 AKs, Vlad?
I did, and that was actually one of the reasons I decided to do that, because my experience is completely different. Primarily, I used AK-101, 102, tested it extensively, Saiga MK03, then a little bit of AK-201. And in my experience, 5.56 AKs work extremely well. In fact, when we get to more detailed explanations, once a 5.56 AK worked so well that it actually became a problem for me. So I don't. I was fascinated that people see a problem there. 5.56 AKs for many reasons, and I just I could never understand what's where did it come from.
So I guess we kind of got into the bluff, the bottom line up front. It seems that Vlad has experienced less of these issues that we have in the American market. I guess that's a line, right?
I guess because I think again those problems probably come from what do you say? My steak is too juicy, my lobster is too buttery. So that's essentially the situation that U.S. gun owners are in, and I really want people to appreciate what they have. And we're going to come back to that many times because in other countries you don't have the problem with magazine compatibility. You're given a certain amount of magazines and that's it. And maybe you're, I don't know, buy some moonshine, give it to your ordnance officer, and he gives you a few more magazines. But you never get a chance to experience those problems because your access to weapons is severely limited. So I was not, obviously when I was using those weapons, it was primarily standard mil-spec Russian-made magazines or some commercial stuff that worked relatively well. But it was not the wild west of the U.S. market where you have German magazines, Romanian magazines, then something made out of plastic, made God knows where. So yeah, that might be a problem. But people like to talk about I would say, combat applications of weapons. And I'm not saying people don't understand what a combat application of weapon is, but the reality is people who actually use those weapons, they have very, very limited choices, and they don't experience that problem most of the time.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is the Russian men said it is an American problem. There is no problem in Russia.
You see, it's no problem in Russia because, again, the access for Russians, the access to rifles is extremely limited, and Russian forces did not, and do not, and probably will not use 5.56 weapons. Or I'm going to talk about some honorable exceptions. But the reality is, a country, for example, quite a few countries used. For example, AK-101, Egypt, Indonesia, and, Malaysia. There are quite a few of those weapons in Kenya. They get their magazines, 4 mags a gun or more if they ordered more, and they use it. And my experience, if we want to get deep into that, my first experience with AK-101 was somewhere in 2014.
Hold on. Mm-hmm. We're getting into the case studies, Vlad. You've seen the slides on what we're going to talk about.
Yes.
So you're on a roll here. But before we get to the case studies, though, I do have to note that we just breached 300 live stream viewers right now. And of the 300 lucky souls that we are in the presence of, thank you very much. Do me a favor, click on the like, and then we could propagate this AK, not propaganda, gospel out farther into the internet. And let's see how far we can get. However, as I was saying, though, as you are currently clicking the like button, as I know you probably are, we're going to get into the case studies. And we're going to look at 5.56 AKs from multiple different countries. And I think we chose the ones outside of the US AKs. We chose the ones that have a pretty good reliability track record, I think. But let's get into it, shall we? And I started this on the AK-101-102 to feature the OG, I guess it wouldn't be the OG, but it's from the OG location. And Vlad, who took that cool picture down there on the bottom left? Or who kitted that one out on the bottom left? That looks rather cool.
It looks pretty cool, and I was trying to determine whether I built it from the beginning, or I was just, putting parts on this particular gun and repainting it before every exhibition. I couldn't remember. But this is the gun that I've been bringing to different exhibitions in 2014 and 2015. And when I learned that you built something based on it, it was, I guess it was flattering, because, yeah, we were basically, it was a time when the company had people who had maybe a different understanding of modern employment of weapons. And we were trying to put together guns that we would use with the accessories that were available at the time. So yeah, this gun is very near and dear to my heart. I hope she's in good hands now. But yeah, it's either I built it or I just got it and then started adding accessories and repainting it for, like, this thing is going to France. We need to pick a new cool pattern. Now it's going to Indonesia. Like, what are something maybe national colors we can use? So yeah, it was fun. A lot of paint I had to inhale while painting those things.
So on that note, we're talking about the AK-101, 102. Perhaps I would say, if you talk about the 5.56 AK, this is the 5.56 AK. This is kind of the current gold standard of a 5.56 AK. Tell me about sort of, let's talk about. I mean, clearly TDP transfer is kind of stupid in this case, because this is sort of the standard. But tell me about sort of the development into 5.56. Like, why would Kalashnikov concern push the AK 100 series to really start off with the three calibers of 5.45, 7.62, and then 5.56 of all calibers?
Well, realistically, Ishmash in the early 90s, as soon as they could develop at 5.56 AK, as soon as USSR collapsed and the factory had to look for a new market, they had to look for new clients. They started developing all those rifles as soon as possible. There was no prejudice towards 5.56. There were no prejudice towards 5.56 AKs. And while we're probably going to go into that, arguably 5.56 AKs are older than 5.45 AKs. Obviously, the Russian factory, because the Soviet military-industrial complex wasn't selling to NATO countries, wasn't selling to countries that use 5.56. In the Soviet times, they did not develop such a weapon, unlike a lot of other case studies that we're going to mention. But as soon as they could, they started development of the 101 and 102. As far as I understand, there was good information at AK Info about it. So in 1993, the first prototypes of the AK-102 were produced. And in 1995, the first actual mass-produced batch of AK-101 was produced. So, and that was a very difficult time when the factory didn't really have much money for R&D, and they were doing their best, and they were bringing a lot of calling those people influencers would be insult to them, but people like Peter Kokalis, Deborah Fortier, and many other Charlie Catshow. So a lot of American gun writers, and they really wanted to be to the world. They really wanted to go to markets that were open, that were not open before. And basically, as soon as possible, and I was actually told that there was such a hurry that the Ishmash, they actually somehow ordered somewhere in Czech Republic in the 90s two railroad carts of M193 ammo, just so they could start testing and evaluation as soon as possible. So they were not waiting for 5.56 production in Russia. They were not waiting for some handout. They were trying to acquire 5.56 ammo because, in their understanding, it was their ticket to bright future. And frankly, I think East Germany had the same thoughts, and many other countries that did 5.56 AKs had the same idea and the same plan. So yeah, and starting in late 1990s, those 102s, 101s were sold. I mentioned some countries that used them. And I never really heard of any significant problems with those guns. There were never any complaints about magazines. And as I mentioned, I did extensive testing several times of different Russian 5.56 AKs. Should we go into details now or later? What do you think?
You can go into details. I mean, I think this is a foundation of the whole piece of why
Yeah.
5.56 and AKs.
Yes, so it was always bizarre to me to hear stories about 5.56 being unreliable, 5.56 being incompatible with the AK platform because it went against all my experience in this field. So the first time I was doing some serious 101, 102 testing, I was actually testing two guns. There was a big trial that included AKs in 7.62 and so 103, 104, 102, 101. And the advantage was that we tested all those AKs side to side. So quite literally, I would shoot 103 and then go to 101, and I could compare results. I could compare reliability. And we did some mud tests, and we'll go into the mud test question later. Obviously, sand, water, shooting 300 rounds continuously, which is really not a big deal. And realistically, there was no notable difference between AK-103 and AK-101, AK-104 short-barreled or AK-102 short-barreled. They were just as reliable. They did all the same things. They were just as durable. And frankly, it was the first time when 5.56 was actually slightly more reliable than 7.62 because after firing blanks, which was a part of the trial, there was like one stoppage with 7.62 by 39, and we had to clean it. But 5.56 didn't have any stoppages. So right away, I realized that. I mean, I didn't know that 5.56 had bad reputation, but that first experience was quite extensive. It took, I think, a few weeks. So, are doing the different tests over and over again, and yeah, it worked great. And then a few years later, it was around 2018. We actually had to do a very extensive test of Saiga MK03, so a short-barreled semi-automatic Saiga that looks like AK-102, a 13-inch barrel. So one dealer decided to kind of challenge the notion of AK reliability, and he had friends at the Tula ammo factory. So what he did is he bought a random Saiga at a random shop, and he brought it to the Tula ammo factory, and he invited, I was an advisor in Kalashnikov Media at the time, and he invited a crew to film this whole thing and show, is it really that reliable or not? And so we started shooting, and we shot a total of 5,000 rounds in 2 days. It was one of the most unpleasant shooting experiences I had because it's an ammo factory. So you don't get a normal range. You quite literally load your rifle, you stick it in a hole, and you shoot. And the first time you do it, you kind of come up with a funny joke, and then the second time and the third time, and then it was, I mean, still, it's not the worst day of my life shooting into some hole.
Well, is this Saiga? Is it like the sporting, like sporter stock Saiga?
No, it looks exactly as a 102 on the picture on the right, just with a shorter magazine.
Okay. I was in my mind, Vlad. I was thinking that you were shooting this sporter stock with a weird trigger linkage and a 10-round magazine for 500 of those things.
5,000.
No, well, 500
Yeah.
10-round magazines.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so I think we had some commercial Russian-made plastic 5.56 mags, and because we shot a lot, and it was pretty interesting because in this environment you have brass ricocheting from just like coming back, and like you can accidentally touch something with a charging handle, but there was not a single stoppage in 2 days, which was pretty interesting. We did accuracy testing, I think 2 or 3 times. So the accuracy was very good in the beginning and very good at the end. Unfortunately, it was just a 50-meter range that we could use. So I have the pictures, and it looked like something below 2 MOA. Again, I didn't do the measurements, but the photos are available. I'll show them to you later. And Yeah, and we cleaned it once, and we didn't clean it for like the last, I think, 1,500 rounds. Everyone was impressed, but 5,000 rounds, that's nothing special, really. The most difficult thing was loading all those mags. And a few months later, we go for a second test. And a lot of time has passed because I had a surgery between those two tests, so at least 3 months because I had to learn how to walk again. And I'm going to this new shooting range, and we have to test this MK03 again. So they get it from some safe or whatever. They get it from the car, and I look at it and I realize that nobody cleaned it after we finished. So we shot maybe 1,500 rounds, maybe 2,000 rounds, maybe 2,500. I'm not sure. And then it was stored somewhere without any cleaning, and for 3 or 4 months with all the carbon, with all the falling, and it was like, that's going to be interesting. And so we started shooting it again. And pretty soon we realized that it's terrible video content, because when you're making a video, you need to have a story. You need to have some tension, like in a romantasy novel, like will they, won't they, like what's going to happen. And nothing was happening. You load those 2-3 magazines, you shoot them, you load the magazines again. And there are only so many ways to film a guy shooting a Saiga. And nothing, not a single stoppage, not a single problem. We never actually, through the entire time, we never cleaned the barrel. So we're shooting it and shooting it again. And because the magazines are small, I think between those two testings, half the magazines were disappeared somewhere. And we got to 8,000 rounds. We did the accuracy testing. The accuracy was a little worse. It was around below 3 MOA. So we thought like maybe it's natural wear, which is not great at 8,000 rounds, but it was still below 3 MOA with the cheapest steel case, Tula ammo, and we didn't clean the barrel properly. We shot it after 8,000 rounds, and we quickly cleaned the barrel. We shot it again, and it was again around 3 MOA. So MK03. 8,000 rounds, not a single stoppage, which is not normal. I tested a lot of full auto firearms, and they would have stoppages, like once every 1,000 rounds, once every 2,000 rounds. No stoppages for 8,000 rounds. I wouldn't say it's groundbreaking, but it's good. It's good. It's definitely. I think it's for me. It was another proof that there is nothing wrong with the geometry of 5.56. There is nothing wrong with the idea of 5.56. And we didn't really film much at the time because there was nothing to film about this MK03. There was another one, SR1, and there was a lot of drama because it was using M4 mags, and some mags didn't feed. And then, I think there was some small breakage of parts. And so there was so much drama there. But MK03, if we just had MK03, we'd probably just pack our bags and turn off our cameras and just sit there and think what else can we do, because there is no way to create any drama when you're doing that.
So
yeah,
in Russia though, how common is 5.56, and what do people think about 5.56 in the first place?
It was extremely common because Russians were not allowed to have 5.45 until 2015, I think. So 5.56 Saigas were quite popular. People use them. I never heard anybody actually saying that there is something wrong with a 5.56 Saiga. Somewhere in 2013, there was a small batch of Polish Archer AKs, and their price was, I think, 4 times more than the Saiga. No, they were 4 times. They were 4 times.
Okay.
Of imaginary things. So they were
what was the cost? Like a Saiga was like 500 jelly beans, right?
Yep. So maybe give me maybe 5 times more or 6 times more. So and naturally, the dealer has to convince people that it's worth it, and people are like, Polish AKs. Some people were not happy, and some were like, oh, this is true European quality. And it's 5.56. Yeah, it's probably worth it. And it was like a pretty fashionable thing for a few months.
So for context here, though, for the populace out there, there was a there was an actual ban on military cartridge weapons in Russia up until 2015, like you said, right?
One specifically on 545. The other ones, I mean, for 9 millimeter, it was something similar. So yeah, I mean, Russian gun laws are just like, if you don't have a care in the world, you should study Russian gun laws, and you're going to be as depressed as an average Russian gun owner.
So would it be accurate to say that Russians had more access to 5.56 AKs than 5.45 AKs prior to this?
Well, more access, I think, is a very good way to put it. It's like, I don't know. It's like living in the Arctic during the winter, and like, oh, your access to cold is considerably more than your access to sun. Yeah, 545 did not exist. There was no 545 the civilian market. It was only 556. You want a small caliber, high velocity round, you buy 556, and everyone was okay with it. And there was another case that I mentioned. There were certain people in certain units that were carrying AR-15s, and that bothered everyone. And because Russian special forces with American weapons, stuff like that. So I was talking to one of those guys, and I'm like, why AR-15? And his answer actually shocked me. He said that, well, for what I do, I want high quality hollow point 5.56 ammunition. And there is no high quality hollow point 5.45 ammunition. And 5.56 AKs, we would be happy to use them, but they're not in our procurement system. So I just go and I bring, an AR-15 to work, and then I go to the store and I buy high quality 5.56 hollow point ammunition, because I want this ammo, I want this caliber, and the easiest way for me to just use a different weapon platform in order to have an opportunity to use this particular caliber. It was an interest of a particular gentleman, but it's just, I think, a very good example of how different the mindset of people in different countries are.
It is really interesting because there's certain, let's say, there's certain units in the American system as well that are what we call they usually like to go COTS, like commercial off the shelf weapons, for that particular reason, because it's not in the regular supply system, and the regular supply system, frankly, doesn't serve what they're doing well. So that's interesting that would be the case. And it's not because they're basically trying to use ARs because it's the quickest, most direct solution to shooting 5.56, and they're looking for hollow points.
But again, it was a solution for a particular individuals, and then you talk to their teammates, and they're like, take a look at this guy. He's the only one having 5.56. What he's going to do when he runs out of ammo. And so later on, I did some testing of AK-201, which is basically very similar to AK-101, just with some actually pretty well thought out rails. And again, we did the whole thing, sand test, everything was perfect. Mud test, everything was good. Then 12 magazines, full auto, just to see what's going to happen. I knew nothing would happen, but I wanted to know if there will be a cook-off. So I loaded around in a chamber after shooting 12 the guy shot 12 magazines, put it on the table. I loaded around in the chamber. There was no cook-off, which was good news, I guess. And so 201 worked just as well as 101. There was no there were no problems in my experience. So that's pretty much it for AK 101, 102.
All right. So at this point, type those questions in. Let's see. Are there any questions? Josh, do you see any questions specific to the 100 series? Let's see. I guess this is sort of a question right here when we're looking for the 100 series. It's how modified from the AK-74M is the 100, the 101 and 102?
Well, externally, The differences are quite small, and it caused a lot of problems when you have someone else loading your magazines. They would load 545 and 556, or 556 and 545, and I had those stoppages a few times, and they were actually very easy to fix. You just do your double feed, and then you go back to the place where they loaded magazine and slap someone on the back of the head, and it usually takes care of the problem. But yeah, at the same time, developing an AK, it's I guess people imagine it as a bunch of cavemen just trying to stick random rounds into the chamber. No, you just you see what kind of changes are required for the bullet guide, and you make it work, and that's it. And actually, mil-spec magazines and Saiga magazines were different. And if I remember correctly, 556 Saiga magazines, the magazine was working as a bullet guide. So Saiga magazines were not compatible with AK-101 magazines. But the thing is, both Saiga 556 magazines worked reliably, and AK mil-spec magazines worked reliably as well.
And finally, what is the Russian standard for barrel life in 556?
Actually, there is no standard for barrel life. There was a very long drama about basically determining the system life for an AK, and it was such a bureaucratic problem that the factory basically did a lot of tests, and 7.62 even went to 50,000 rounds. But in my time, and it was like 10 years ago and more, it was so difficult to upgrade the information, and the standard information was 10,000 rounds. It was so difficult to upgrade it and convince whatever, I don't know, the emperor of the universe to sign some papers or whatever, that nobody changed that. But in my experience, 15 to 20, depending on the type of ammo you use, because there is Russian armor piercing ammo, RS-101, which I would think is a lot harder on the barrel.
Okay, so we're starting to step back in history here. And I think this is one of the first ones on the list that you sent me that you wanted to talk about.
Yes, because I spent some time in Finland. I had a wonderful opportunity to train with some reservists, and shot a lot of those AKs. And realistically, Finland was experimenting with 5.56 AKs and building prototypes at the same time as Soviet Union was experimenting with 5.45. And it wasn't 5.45 in the beginning. I think it was 5.6 by 41. I need to check this one book to be sure. So basically, this creation of small caliber high velocity AK for small caliber high velocity rounds was going pretty much simultaneously. What didn't happen simultaneously was the adoption, because Israeli Galil is based on RK-71, RK-62. They formally adopted their Galil in 1972, while the Soviet Union formally adopted AK-74s in 1974, and there was still some testing going on, troop trials in 1974. So you can argue that 5.56 AKs exist longer than 5.45 AKs. It doesn't matter if 5.45 AKs are worse or inferior. No, it's just there is no basis for saying that, 5.56 AKs are not historically authentic. Come on. It's just not true.
So I don't know if I could find this comment. Yes, here we go. Elitism is where 5.56 AKs get hate, but you guys heard it. Vlad was schooling us that the 5.56 AK, in fact, if you have to say actually, the 5.56 AK existed longer than the 5.45 AK.
You can add that, if you think that, 5.56 is not the original round, then you can look the same way at AR-15 and say, well, this is not the original round. The real AR, the AR-10, was chambered in 7.62 by 51. And therefore, AR-15, this design, that's not the original round for this design. So AR-15 should not be considered a serious weapon. So again, if this is complete nonsense, but I'm just trying to follow the logic that people have.
Okay, so let's talk about the story of the Galil and the Finn RKs, because I think there's a little bit of a crossover between the two countries, and there is a very interesting story of how the Galils came to be. But it starts with the Finns developing the RK series, the Sako series AKs, or the Valmet or Sako that came out with it first.
Both. It's. I got to the source and like, is it Saka or Walnut? And they're like, well, it depends on the actual manufacturer of this exact gun. So in order to name it, look at the receiver and who made it, and only then you have a right to call it Saka or Walnut. Yeah.
So the Finnish pattern, let's say.
Yes.
Oh, we've got some love from Vietnam.
Oh, I think
Let's
I know the
see.
guy. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So let's I'd hope you'd get a chance to see the STV series at Viet Defense this year. It's the Galil shoot-off that
I
returned
love
to.
going to Vietnam, and my last trip to Vietnam was a blast because it's a country with very limited access to firearms. But the guys I met there were extremely knowledgeable, extremely well educated. We had a wonderful time. Not to mention that I absolutely love Vietnamese food, so I guess I should start setting up for a trip to Vietnam now.
I've heard of a one of the pho restaurants in Saigon that where it's known for I think like 80 years or 100 years pho broth. They keep on just adding ingredients and into the broth. I mean, look, it sounds nasty to some people, but this was a European thing too. The perpetual stew was a thing in medieval Europe, all the way up to World War One, when a lot of Europe got train wrecked. A lot of these stews were perpetual through the years. So this is a thing that human beings do, and I would love to try some of that perpetual pho. But Vietnam's a good segue because they ended up adopting the Galil Ace, which is that is a completely different story on the AK track, some Colombian involvement. But right now, let's talk about the Finnish RK series and how that ended up in Israel as a Galil. So how did
Mhm.
the RK start?
Well, if we concentrate on the RK, the Finns essentially got some help from Poland. Interestingly enough, it was not the only case. Someone got help from Poland. We'll go back to that. So Finland did not have official transfer of technology. They acquired some Polish Type 3 AKs with a milled receiver, and they decided to build something completely different, and in a way, maybe quite progressive for its time. I wrote a bunch of articles on the story of Finnish AKs. My Finnish friends helped me a lot reading, the Finnish sources. But basically, the first prototype was RK60, and it already had all of those signature parts. Having a gas block and a front sight as a one unit, very similar stock, and very similar receiver cover. So basically, they just from the very beginning they were on the right path. And interestingly enough, when you look at the Galil prototypes, they're just Soviet AKs with 5.56 barrels. They don't look like Galils. Oh, they don't look like RK-62 at all. But then I don't know how Israel got hold of the first RK-62s, but every Finn who's educated in the history of his own weapons will tell you a story of Finland selling and sending milled receivers that were actually labeled as like farm equipment or something to Israel, and then Israel using it to build the first batch of Galils, and then making it into a weapon that's still being produced and sold. And this is actually something that bothers me a lot because not this particular fact, but I think it's a perfect example of something that people don't really understand. They talk like, oh, less armies are using AKs or less armies are using this and that. You see, proliferation of a weapon is not directly connected to its performance. If you spend enough time in a military, military procurement, you sure know that it's true. But this is a perfect example. RK62, RK95 is pretty much the same thing as Galil, but the production of finished AK doesn't exist anymore, and production of Galils is doing very well. Those are, in terms of performance, those weapons are pretty much identical. But there are other factors in play, geopolitical factors, the willingness of a government to promote their weapons, and yeah, Valmet rifles do not exist anymore. They are not being they haven't been produced from 1996. Oh my God, 30 years. And does it mean that those are bad rifles? No, but there are factors outside of weapons performance that determine its fate, and that's just the reality, you know.
And so, one thing that I've got to point out on this slide deck, remember, I am highlighting whether there is a TDP transfer, a technical data package transfer to these countries. This means whether the host nation, in this case it would be Russia, had formally sent trainers, whether they sent equipment or not, officially sent some of the data and let's say they gave not just a cookbook, but also the ingredients for people to create said item. And there was absolutely none of this for the Finns as they went in. So, I mean, I thought that was pretty impressive that they were able to press something out that was really one of the best.
They were not the only ones who followed this path.
Let's see. Okay, so Josh is asking if this is just for 5.56. No, and we're going to talk about some of the TDP transference in the future in some of the other cases as well. But it ought to be noted, and I think Vlad specifically specified for me to put this in the first deck, is because the 5.56 AK, if this is one of the first 5.56 AKs, came before the AK-74. That is a wild statement to put out there. But then, of course, came the Galils. And was a guy's name Balashnikov? I'm a little hazy on
it was Balashnikov, and then he changed it to a more Israeli name. So that is definitely an interesting irony. And he was he was an incredible salesman. I enjoy watching his weapon presentations, and if you have a chance, just look it up on YouTube. And the guy was a natural born salesman, and the success that Galil had at the international market is truly impressive. You mentioned Colombia, South Africa, naturally, it's a big deal. Vietnam, where now there is an operational factory making STV rifles. So yeah, they took the finished design and they made it considerably more successful in terms of sales. And I don't think anybody complained about the geometry of 5.56 not working in Galil. I have this wonderful book by Peter Kokalis. Just read it this morning, and he was testing Galils in 1982. And naturally, there were no problems at all with reliability or whatever. Oh yes, and the bottle opener, and actually, this gentleman Galili, he demonstrated the bottle opener at every weapon demonstration he did.
So that to me, I mean, it's funny that the Galil is a copy of the Kalashnikov, and the guy was kind of like, you can copy my homework. I don't think Mikhail said that, but don't make it obvious. And the dude's name is Balashnikov.
It is very ironic, but again, real history is often more interesting than any fiction you can create. So that's, I guess, just one more example.
The other thing, like one thing about the Galils that people sort of wonder about this is they talk about how, if the Galil was truly so good, why did Israel not use more Galils, and why did they use the AR-15 instead? Well, you see, when something is given to you for free,
exactly,
you use the free thing.
Exactly.
Shall I explain that to a greater extent?
I'm
But
sure everyone is quite familiar with the concept of free shit.
yeah, so there was a significant amount of inflow of free 5.56 rifles in the form of AR-15s,
Hmm.
and
And
therefore,
again, they did not close the factory. They did not destroy the production line. They kept making Galils and selling them quite successfully. So, I don't know how you can determine that it's a bad rifle just because they took M16s that were almost free, as far as I understand.
this is just hitting me right now. Let's put a pin on this comment on free or cheap ARs
Hmm.
versus a high quality AK and 5.56, because I think this applies to what we're seeing in the US market as well. So the topic of competition between two platforms, but the cost of getting into it.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think we are ready for the next slide, but I would like to remind the audience we hit 400 earlier. If you guys out there want to propagate some of this AK knowledge out there, go ahead and hit the like and definitely share this to some of your friends, because we are just at the tip of the iceberg right here. We are about to go into some serious AK nerddom as we continue to crack on with the different applications of the 5.56 AK worldwide and some of the success stories. And then finally, we're going to come back to delve into, so why is the American market reflecting that the 5.56 AK is bad? And we'll kind of delve into this question and figuring it out. So I think this one's going to be good, and this is a good reminder, Josh. If we can pop up the link that Vlad has recently published a book on the Yugoslav AK from what's about the
Balkans to Babylon.
yeah, sorry.
No
And we're
worries.
told we're part of this topic is I think part of this topic most interesting is also the Yugoslav uh, tendency of making AKs and how some people may actually say that they're better than the original. I don't know. There's a lot of nationalism tied to these phrases out there, and it's very, very difficult to talk about this from a third party perspective. But Vlad, since you are a recent published author on the Yugoslav pattern, tell us about the M80, the M90, and the M21. And there is no TDP transfer for this system as well.
There was no TDP transfer, and I was very lucky to meet a lot of incredible people who helped me to write this book. And uh, I guess the most incredible person I met, and I just don't want to offend every other incredible person I met, was Dragoljub Grujevic, who worked at the factory since I think 1968, and he was a CEO of Zastava twice. And he wrote a wonderful book, which is called Kako se kale oružarski čelik, which is how the gun steel was hardened. And it's actually the first memoir of someone who was there when M70 was developed. A mind-blowing book. I was glad I learned Serbian because it only exists in Serbian, and it's even in Serbian it's impossible to find. So I was very lucky. And he actually he's the first person who explained how the TDP that didn't happen actually happened. So I'm gonna skip the first part because everyone knows the story about two Albanian border guards that ran to Yugoslavia. That story might not actually be true. I write about what actually happened in my book. But when Yugoslavia already had the samples, they needed to understand the manufacturing process. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that Yugoslavia at the time, it was not a typical socialist country, truly had a great relationship with a lot of different countries. For example, I was kind of surprised that their standard first night vision scope was Dutch. And they were like not concerned that the Dutch are going to stop supplying because they had a wonderful relationship with pretty much everyone, including Poland. So they asked their Slavic brothers for help. And the Polish said, we cannot officially transfer you any technology. we cannot give you any advice. If you come to our factory and look around and you don't make any notes and you don't write anything down and you don't ask us for any blueprints, I guess there is nothing we can do if you just hang out there for a few days. So a team of Yugoslavian engineers was sent to Poland, and they quite literally just hang out at the factory, just looking around, coming back to their hotel, making notes, then going back to the factory, looking around, coming back to the hotel in the evening, making notes, and that was enough for them to actually establish production of first M70, then M70B, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to M80, until recently, there was, I'm not really sure that probably something was written in English about it, but there was this consensus that the first time those weapons were demonstrated was in 1985. There was this exhibition and the big parade in Belgrade. But when I was looking for information for my book, there was a dealer sample with one of the dealers in the US of an M80A with a folding stock made in 1983, which was to me quite surprising because like you read any Serbian book, you talk to any Serbian, professional, he will say 1985. No earlier than that. But there is a dealer sample. It was recently sold for something. Essentially, Yugoslavia understood very well that they need to monetize this great relationship they have with everyone. And making 5.56 AKs was the way to go. So, but unfortunately, especially starting from 1985, Yugoslavia entered a very dark period of their history. So it was really hard to make things happen. So there was M80, M80A. Then there was an improved version of M90, M90A. But they are so hard to find, I couldn't find them at the factory when I went to their museum and I went to their showroom. I still hope that maybe they're hidden somewhere behind the shelves and maybe I'll see them one day. But I was able to photograph M85, which is a short-barreled 5.56 Zastava rifle. And actually, I photographed two different versions of it. The second one is a pretty interesting prototype. So there was M90, M90A, which was tested right before the collapse of Yugoslavia at the shooting range in Sarajevo. And actually, the soldiers loved it. I found some soldiers who shared their impressions. And then, obviously, in the 90s, there wasn't much they could do. There were sanctions from 92 to 96. And then there were more sanctions later. There was an M95, which is a slightly modified, M80, M90, same concept. But only after the year 2000, they really started developing something for their own military in 5.56. And the final result was M21, Zastava M21. It is, and I wrote about it, and there is an entire chapter in my article about it. And I have certain nostalgic feelings towards this gun because it wasn't one of the weapons that I worked in Iraq, because at the time in the early 2000s there weren't really too many customers for it, but different security companies actually bought a lot of those M21s. So I inspected them. I didn't really repair them because they didn't break, but it was just like one of those unusual guns that I saw in the beginning of my career. And so in a way, the Zastava M21 was kind of a symbol of a changed country, because they had an agreement with NATO about joint training and everything. And slowly, Zastava M21 was rolled out into the units, and now it's one of main rifles used by Serbian forces. Went to chrome lining with 5.56 series gun. I was thinking barrel life maybe is extraction. Okay, so basically, I could not understand for years why Yugoslavia did not chrome line the barrels right away. After I talked to Dragoljub Grujovic, he explained to me that in the early 70s, there was not a good technology to chrome line the barrels. But then by 1984, Yugoslavia actually received a transfer of technology for PKM, which had a chrome line barrel. So they had the technology in the mid to late 80s. They finally had the technology to chrome line the barrels. But the military did not require to chrome line barrels. So they chrome lined all the machine gun barrels. They chrome lined the barrels on new rifles such as M80, M90, and M21 naturally. But they did not chrome line barrels until the year 2020, I think. And now all Zastovas have chrome line barrels, which, in my opinion, is certainly an improvement.
So on the Chrome Line barrel, this is something that I've put out incorrect information in the past. I've tried to write corrections on it, but I do think that it's interesting that when people here in the States see really rotted out Yugo AK barrels in 7.62, clearly the ammunition was corrosive, and corrosive ammunition, in fact, does have an edge on shelf life. A lot of people assume that the Yugoslav military just didn't do a good job in maintaining it, whereas they forget that there was an entire couple years of bloodiness and partisan fighting using said AKs that honestly discipline went right out the window. But prior to that, evidently I've read and heard from former Yugoslav soldiers that the punishment for rotting out your AK's barrel or your SKS's barrel was quite severe for Yugoslav service members.
Yes, it was actually the problem of rotting barrels didn't exist to the same extent while it was just a weapon in Yugoslavia. But soldiers were quite disciplined. It was not a big deal. But once those weapons were exported to places like Iraq, Africa, naturally there was no care. And I had in my book I talk about those experiences testing guns in Somalia when it works perfectly. It's a M7TB, this beautiful milled receiver rifle, works like a Swiss clock, and you can't hit a target at 10 meters because the barrel is completely rotted away. And there was a surprising realization recently when I was working in Africa. I came across a bunch of East German AKs. So obviously best barrel quality possible, chrome lined, everything. And their barrels were pretty much in the same condition as Yugoslav AKs. Because when you're not maintaining your rifle for decades, which is the case in Somalia, it doesn't matter. Even East German AK will rot. And I was quite surprised because, like, you know, my experience, I like East German AKs. They have their own problems. But seeing those several East German AKs with rotted barrels, which fail the gauge inspection, and you can see that they're completely rotted away with almost no rifling, that was like kind of the final straw. I realized that chrome lining is great. It's wonderful. But there is nothing that can prevent this if the weapon is not maintained for decades.
All right, so let's hold the East German talk for the Vega coming up. The next one, though, Josh has popped up the particular comment about Chinese AKs, and as we're getting into the China talk, Vlad, you have published in the past on the poor quality of the Chinese AK, and I published in the past of the great quality of the Chinese AK. But it's almost like people think that we believe that Chinese AKs are either the best or the worst. But in reality, it's both. Both is correct about Chinese AKs. But I would say perhaps the Norinco Type 84, 84S, so this is China's 5.56 AK from the 80s, is more on the good side. The reason for that is because it was made specifically for the US market. If you look at the AK itself, it looks like it's a Type 56, which, by the way, notice the TDP transfer, it says partial here because it's a modification off of the Type 56, which the Type 56 was, let's say, the milled version is a direct transfer from the Type 3 Russian Kalashnikov. Once it got to the stamped model and then beyond, the Chinese were starting to try to rechamber this one specifically for the US market. And it's no mystery why in the 80s they were trying to capture the US market, because they were selling to the US market, unlike the current days where you cannot get any Chinese AKs here. But I think I specified Norinco here, but Polytech was also out there selling Kalashnikovs. But a lot of people, when they look at Chinese AKs, they forget that, or they look at is it a Polytech or is it a Norinco? They forget that these are export firms. These are
Yes.
not manufacturing firms. Yeah, so they go about they put orders in different factories for a specific AK, and they batch sell that one to an importer here in the US, whether it's like CSI, King's. There were multiple importers that were bringing things in from China, and then they get sold under the Norinco or the Polytech brand. So there is no factory that is a Norinco factory. There's a factory 626 with a triangle 66 inside of it, which a lot of the Type 84s were triangle 66 AKs. But I think that is the Chinese AK is a Wild West situation. It's a very difficult one to say whether it's amazing or not. It is, as one of our viewers said earlier, it's how much you pay for it and how good your importer is, right? So
Every time somebody comes up to me and like, oh, you said Chinese AKs are bad, and it hurts because when I first started working as an armor, I would like write down in my notes every single gun, and I had like little cute names for different guns just to save some time. And for Factory 386 and Factory 26 Chinese AKs, I had the nickname was MB, which is milled beauty. That's how I call Chinese AKs in my personal notes. So when people tell me like, "Oh, you think Chinese AKs are bad?" I just like it's offensive. I just know what was going on through the years, and there were some really bad Chinese AKs. There were some really good Chinese AKs, but I guess people are they don't want to read beyond headlines.
So I would say this. Look at what China makes today. If it were me, I would. This isn't a direct correlation, and right here we've got the Chinese SKS import scene. Yes, the SKS import scene was absolutely insane because they were selling like actual surplus Gong'an SKSs from the arsenal back in the day. So that even went into actual AKs that were service AKs, SKS is being pushed out there. But if we're just looking at the AKs in Norinco and Polytech, think of Temu, think of Alibaba. These are companies that you go through to buy from factories out there. Now, what the factory is, it's mystery meat to a lot of people. Now, some of them may be good. You know, China also made iPhones. I use an iPhone. China also makes little, toys for little kids that have lead paint in it that could kill them. So, is this order going to America or is it going to Africa? Typically, the ones going to America were slightly better. Well, not slightly better, better in quality. And definitely the Type 84 being a rechambered Type 56 being pushed to the American market, and most certainly was a better quality 5.56 AK than a lot of the African variety AKs, I would say. I mean, the other side is if your SKS was made for official use, typically the PLA does not take bad quality weapon systems out there. So there's also that. But did you have anything else on the Chinese AK?
No, not really. Never seen 5.56 Chinese AK in the field, so blank.
Niet.
Good.
All right, so the Arsenal ARM-1. I think most people in America would know, the Bulgarian ARM-1. Most people in America would know it as the Arsenal SAM-5. Now, I'm saying modified because you'll notice that the ARM-1, the front of it, uses a 24 millimeter muzzle device. And a lot of people, I believe this image had been perpetuated out there and has a lot of incorrect information written on the captions. Some people are saying an Afghan was using an AK-74. Some people were saying that it's special forces using an AK in Afghanistan. This is none of those. And right here, you could see that the TDP transfer is partial. Let me talk about sort of what this is before we get into the process of how this came about. It's a milled receiver, Kalashnikov, with some AK-74 features mixed into it. And then specifically for this, it is a 5.45 chambered ARM-1. And what you're looking at in this image is actually a U.S. service member playing as OP4, opposition force. So it's a training environment. That's why you see a blank adapter in the front. If I were to guess, and this is from someone
they call it a clue.
This is from someone who's worked in that particular training area in Germany, namely the Raffenwehr, but more notably, this is probably out of Hohenfels, the home of the OP4 forces in Germany, the Men in Black. They typically use the Bulgarian chambered ARM-1s with blank firing adapters to use American munition supply and the AK system as a visual cue to train American soldiers. However, the backstory to this and how I got there is also equally interesting because it goes down. I believe it goes down to the Type 3, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But I think Bulgaria had a transfer of technology for both Type 3 and AKMs, and it was their conscious decision to produce more milled AKs, which I think makes a lot of sense. I personally love milled AKs, and so I have plenty of respect for people who manufacture them. However, I've worked with a lot of Bulgarian AKs in 7.62x39 in the field, and I've never really seen in the field a Bulgarian AK in 5.56. So there is almost nothing I can add to this.
I've seen it very often when I was in Germany, and that was it's a very specific unit in the U.S. that uses it. So for those if you've ever seen all four with the Bulgarian ARM-1, a lot of times it's probably out of Hohenfels, Germany. So now this is actually not on the U.S. market, but its cousin with the 14x1 muzzle device, the SAM-5 is. But shout out to Kvar. Would love to see the ARM-1 in this form because it's definitely got a special place in my heart. And probably anyone who's faced the OP4, the mighty OP4 out in Hohenfels has been under the mercy of the ARM-1. Now, if you look closely, you can see that thing that's clipped onto where the gas tube and the barrel is. I think that's part of the Miles gear, and you can see on the soldier, you could see those the round things. Those are the laser sensors. So basically, it's got a laser emitter clipped onto it. Whenever the rifle recoils, the laser fires off a beam, and then it hits the other person on their vest, and then it starts buzzing, and you're supposed to be dead in that training scenario. And so, yeah, this is an actual NATO country using a 5.56 AK, which we'll talk about the other NATO country that uses the 5.56 AK later on. Technically, Estonia used a Galil as well. So that could be the other NATO AK. But that's beside the point. because we're stepping into Ostdeutsch. And this is one I am not I am aware, but I'm actually not familiar with, but I also know it's not very common.
It is not very common because certain people took a considerable effort to make it uncommon. It was, I think, East Germany. There is, I can't because I don't speak German. I don't have that many. I have some friends in German, but not too many. So they didn't. They had to pay to the Soviet Union for the license to produce AK-74. And well, they exported their 7.62 AKs all over the world. They could not do the same thing with AK-74. So in order to go around that restriction, they developed, how do you pronounce it? Viger.
Yeah, E. So if it's IE, then you pronounce it E. If it's EI, then it's I. So you pronounce a second. You pronounce a second vowel.
Yeah, Viger. I am not sure. Anyway, STG 940. So the STG 940 was
You mean
a
the
great way.
Sturmgewehr?
Yeah, Sturmgewehr 940 was a great way to go around that restriction. So they developed a pretty capable rifle in the late 80s. It was there's a wonderful story of this rifle in The Green Reaper, Frank Yanamiko's book, incredible book if you like AKs. And essentially, after the unification of Germany's, the West German government just wanted to kill this project. Even though there were active contracts to Peru, there was a contract to India. The rifles were already supplied, and I'm sure that East Germany or West Germany would have a lot of very faithful customers because they have the reputation. Their weapons are well known, and the country could have made a lot of money selling those things. But the West German government decided to actually pay the fines instead of delivering on the contracts that were already signed, and then actually destroyed a large number of those rifles that were in stock. And something that I would never understand, and I've never seen this gun in the field, and maybe I'll try to find it somewhere in India someday. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the inspiration for incest, but let's not talk about incest. It's a whole different story.
So I thought it was interesting that it's a Sturmgewehr. I mean, clearly Sturmgewehr just means assault weapon. But how weird of an arc is it that if you look at this, the Sturmgewehr 44 or the MP43, MP44, the Sturmgewehr, the grandfather Sturmgewehr, went out to. I know it's debatable on how much influence the Sturmgewehr had on the AK. Look, whether you say it's not a complete influence, which it's not, or it's a little bit or a lot, there is some influence on the Sturmgewehr on the AK. So for that to go all the way to Russia to influence the development of the AK, and then for the AK to go back into Deutschland, and then turn into another Sturmgewehr that is based off of the AK pattern, perhaps we could surmise that the 5.56 AK is the last Sturmgewehr out of Germany in that lineage.
Well, we'll see.
Chat, what do you think? Do you think this is? Do you think that tracks? That the Sturmgewehr 940, the Vega, is the last iteration of a certain people's play toy. And on that note, I shall go to the next one. And people are saying yes. So I think that's now we've established the internet lore that the Sturmgewehr 940 is the final solution to the
final solution to the question of Sturmgewehr. Let's go to the next one.
You can't say that on the internet.
I'm just saying about technical solutions, the technical
Oh
solution.
my gosh. After we talk about that, we're on to the Polish rifle. That is a great segue.
Mm-hmm. It was a wonderful story in Small Arms Review about how burial was created, more or less. It was quite inspirational because in 2003, I think Polish forces, I think it was deployment to Iraq. Yeah, and basically they had their standard AKs and no upgrades, and they started using whatever accessories they could. And the Polish commanders actually took notice, and they actually within years, not decades, years, developed Beryl and developed an upgraded AK that was actually solving soldiers problems. And that is, I think, an amazing example of how we should react to those things.
Now, I mean, it's difficult to talk about the Vizor 96 here without talking about the Vizor 88, which is the 545 adaptation of the AKM, and developing. I say partial here because clearly the Poles had the TDP to develop their AKM, and the Vizor 88, which was the 545, was not developed with a TDP transfer for the AK-74. And this is a continuation of that. So there was some knowledge transfer of the baseline to develop the 762 version, but then the later on iterations of the 545 and then the Vizor 96 in 556, there was no direct data transfer. But Vlad, when was the AK-101 put together in Russia?
95, 96.
So this was almost on the same timeline as the 101 being put together in Russia.
If we talking about 88, then yeah. If we talking about 96, a little later.
Okay, but I'd say like not far off from one another. And the interesting thing that I didn't even know until you talked about it was that there were vendors actually trying to sell the Vizor 96 to Russian citizens, and was it actually popular? Did people actually really want the barrel?
It was, you see, the company doesn't exist anymore, but they did a great marketing campaign. They tried to hire those few influencers that were around. They tried to build a reputation. They did some tests, and then all those imports just stopped. So there was never really an opportunity to go and test. So because probably those things were expensive, only people who buy expensive guns and don't shoot bought them. And I'm not sure how many were brought. Maybe it was just test samples. But trying to sell something for like 4x the price, 5x the price, that was definitely a very bold attempt on, you bringing AKs to Russia and trying to sell them for, 4x. I just have a lot of respect for people who do stuff like that.
Now, I would say, rip to barrel imports, but I think they're actually trying to start some more for the US, but that's part of a different story because now it's moving straight to commercial stuff. But the Vizor 96, I would say, much like the Galil, were kind of the exception to 556 AKs because from what we're talking about so far, if I were, and this is some foreshadowing on what we're going to talk about at the conclusion, it seems like the biggest drive to 556 AKs have been commercial sales, whereas the Galil was not. The Galil was for actual military use, and the Vizor 96 was for NATO integration, so actual military use. And so the interesting thing that I see here are that the two of the more popular magazine patterns for 556 AKs, the Galil and the Vizor 96, were for military use, for government use, mass manufacture. So I think the interesting thing there also is, why our earlier import IO Inc. imported Vizor 96s desirable is because during that time frame, it was still the main arm of the Polish military. It was still the same line manufacturing the Vizor 96s. So you still had the oversight in order to make those nicely into Bazaar 96s. Same thing with why people like 6920s, because the old school Colt 6920s is because that was the same era Colt was making the M4 for the US government and going through the same QCs and manufacturing a lot of the components in-house. For me, as a nerdy collector, that's what I'm looking at, and that's I'm trying to draw some dots here in looking at the Bazaar 96s, but I think of all of these, probably this is one of the AKs that people in America probably know a little bit more than the other ones. And I know, just to disappoint everyone to begin with, I had not included the Romanian SAR-3 or the systems that the Romanians put here. We should mention it at the end. Maybe that's something I should have put in there. But we'll talk about the Romanians later as well. Sorry about that. You ready for the next one? Or is there anything? Let's see if there's anything out there in the chat. I'm going to look through the ones that Josh has starred. See if there's anything. Nope. All right. Aha! We're back. We're back to Russia with a Saiga 223. And specifically, I'm putting this in here as a US import because, of course, the MK Saigas look like the AK, whereas the US imported Saigas were hunting rifles and had hunting rifle features. So you could see that notably, if you look at an American Saiga, you'll see those two holes on the very bottom left of the receiver. Those are the two pivot point axis holes for the two extra bars to activate a trigger system that is like a Rube Goldberg machine to trip a blind AK trigger that is farther forward. It's not the best trigger. It's definitely not the best hunting rifle. But for the low cost of $199 jelly beans back in 2003, you were able to own the base blueprint of a Russian manufactured AK-100 series rifles. And back then, frankly, people did not know how good they had it for us in the US, because now you can't. Now you get one of these things, it's easily 10x what they used to cost. And I think this one's interesting for me because for us on the channel side, I didn't realize that people hadn't watched our AK-9er series, and this is kind of a throwback to the AK-102 that you had put at the very beginning. I actually tried to make a camo pattern that kind of duplicated the one that you painted on that particular one. So there's a little bit of incestual who's copying who between Vlad and I here. But the Saiga 223s, I haven't heard, or the Saiga 223 specifically, I haven't heard a lot of these things failing. But I think one thing that people always look for with the Saigas is whether it has a dimpled receiver or not. And I've actually had a conversation with one of our mutual friends over in the motherland about how the receivers are made, and that the Saiga 223 receivers were basically spit out in the receiver machine based off of the Saiga 410s. So that's why, as far as magazine goes, that's why my particular AK-9er could take Galil mags and still function, no issue. It takes all sorts of really weird magazines and it still functions. So mine takes barrel mags, Galil mags, 100 series mags, and then a lot of civilian types of magazines. And so for me, the interesting thing there is the unintended consequence that I've seen with the Saiga 223 on some of them, not all of them. The slab side, my slab side, I don't know if all of them are like this, seems to work with any magazine.
That's fascinating.
That's really weird. Yeah, but I think the interesting thing is when it comes to the Saigas, unironically, I think I probably have more experience messing with them, the hunting Saigas, than you.
Yeah, I mean, this it's definitely a story of a caterpillar to butterfly. In your case, and those hunting saigas, they were never really sold in Russia. So if I mean, maybe like in the 90s or something, but generally when saigas were sold on the civilian market, they looked like AK-100 series.
And so for the funny thing is for some of these guys, um, context has to be put into this because while Russians, I believe back then you could buy a lot of American rifles, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if you had the permits,
yeah.
and we could buy Saigas. And then, in fact, when I was in the military, we were buying Mi-8s from Russo Boron Exports
Yep.
for the Afghans. So we were buying full-on military helicopters directly from official Russian export sources for American missions in Afghanistan. So the crazy thing is, Vlad, that was 10 years ago. Well, no,
Uh,
not 10 years ago.
no, 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 no,
2014
no.
was when it stopped. So
Mhm.
14 years ago, we were still
Yeah.
doing that.
Russian DIA, Drug Enforcement Agency, was deploying together with American DEA to
That's,
Afghanistan.
that's
Yeah.
crazy. It's this is kind of like watching. I guess this is kind of what like watching the Berlin Wall go up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's sad, but let's not make our lives sadder than they already are.
It's just strange. It's a strange moment when you look back at how the relationships were that when the Saiga 223 existed on the market. But I would say because of that,
hmm
we now have the American manufactured AK-556. Were there any TDP transfers? Of course not. I mean, not that I know of. I guess you could argue the Kalashnikov USA kind of had a TDP transfer, but that was a messy process of how that whole thing came about. And um, a lot of times, I would say one thing I would draw back on TDP transfers. It's easy to say, "Oh, get the blueprints or whatever." There's a lot of the expertise that comes about with having actual trainers and expertise on ground to help the manufacturing of something. And it's not just even if you inherit, like let's say right now, if China goes into Taiwan and the TSMC, the chip making factory, completely vacates its experts, they would not be able to immediately crank out chips. Uh, I'm not saying in the future whether they could or not. I'm saying even if they had the equipment on ground operating, lost all the expertise, very difficult for them to make anything. It's the same concept, I would say. Even if you had the entire line here in the US and you didn't have the expertise in manufacturing it, it's kind of difficult for the US to manufacture AKs correctly to the Russian spec. So, what you have here, a few different ones that I wanted to draw people's attention to on the very top that looks like an AK-101. That is the Meridian copy of the AK-101. One of the giveaways when you're looking at clone rifles to the Russian rifles, you look at the stock latch. So the latch that keeps a stock closed, you see those are black. Now, I mean, clearly this isn't on every case, but that's one of the clues if you look and you see a black sock latch that's, to look a little closer. So the Russian 101s typically have it's a silver sock latch. On the bottom right, you'll see an interesting creation from Palmetto State. That is a Palmetto State AK-556 with a Stanag mag adapter. And then on the left, you have a an RD, what's the full name of RD?
Rifle Dynamics.
Rifle Dynamics. This is a Rifle Dynamics NATO rifle, which technically this wasn't an AK 556 back in the day because they used Bulgarian 556 AKs, the SLR 106, to modify into the NATO rifles. And now they're using a lot of, let's say, I think they're using a lot of Romanian and even PSAs and stuff like that to make American AKs nowadays. But this is kind of where the conversation on case study kind of stops, I would say, because this itself, the US side, has now turned into the topic of people questioning whether 556 is even viable in Kalashnikovs. And we go back to the first question that we had. Is the AK in 556 viable? With the two caveats. One, magazines, because there is a wide variety of magazines, a wide pattern of magazines. Does this make this viable or not? Point number two, is the 556 cartridge even suitable to be chambered in the Kalashnikov? And so I think the American market has kind of muddled that conversation and made it a lot more difficult for us to delve into. I would bounce it to you, Vlad. I mean, what do people in Russia think about the American Kalashnikovs and the American iteration of Kalashnikovs and the Kalashnikov in 556?
Well, perhaps I try to follow things in Russia less these days than before. I would say that the absolute majority of people who are interested in firearms didn't know much about the U.S. market. Then they were coming to me and asking, and essentially, you see, the U.S. market is certainly fascinating, but a lot of things that exist in the U.S. market, they do not have any foundation outside of the U.S. Like this notion that 556 AKs are somehow bad, because I think that 556, if we're asking ourselves, are 556 AKs viable? It's the answer is if 545 AKs are viable, then 556 AKs are viable. And frankly, I do not see any tragedy in switching from 545 to 556 because those are rounds with very similar capabilities. And it's not you're at the end of the day, you're able to get cheaper ammo that if you want to use quality ammo and see the accuracy capabilities, you can. So I don't really see, I do not really understand this temper tantrum that some people have, like, oh, I'm not going to switch to a 556 AKs. Because 7.62 and 5.56, those are guns with different capabilities. 5.45, 7.62, those are guns with different capabilities. Switching from 5.45 to 5.56, I don't think it's a big deal. I don't see how that is. 5.45 was cheap. It made sense to use it. 5.45 is not cheap and it will not be cheap. Just use whatever is available. And I think, people just overthinking it.
Let me see. We're supposed to be here. So I guess if I were to, no, I'm not going to get there yet, but I guess if I were to look and I think a lot of people, if you look at the AK as a system itself, the highly successful ones seem to be developed for large organizations. You have standard logistics. You can push it out with a lot of magazines, and your cartridges are, as you said, you have no option. You have no choice. You have to use that. When it comes to the nature of 545 or 556 AKs, it seems like a lot of them were developed for the civilian market. Let's look back at the ones, the Chinese Type 84, the Yugo, M80, M90, M21.
Not really. I don't think that the current M90 is obviously created for the civilian market, but the original select fire ones,
Mhm.
they were created for government to government sales.
Okay. So I guess my big question here though, if you're looking at 5.56 AKs, and we kind of alluded to this earlier, let's look at the Israeli model. They had the Galil, a successful 5.56 AK, a 5.56 AK that worked works well. They ended up not using the Galil very much, and they ended up using AR-15s because those were free 99, all of them. Thank you, military aid. To a different extent, with the civilian market here in America, um, you have to compete with the. Ironically, we have a PSA AK right here. You have to compete with the PSA AR-15s. Even if you don't compete with the PSA AR-15s, let's say you're competing with a BCM or a Daniel Defense, let's say for duty use. Very successful, higher than mil spec commercial rifles that shoot 5.56. So I guess the big question is, does the AK have that edge to compete with the American rifles on its own turf? And turf not meaning country per se, but the cartridge 5.56. When you take the cartridge question out, you take the logistical supply out, because a lot of times you purchase these things based off of logistical supply. You end up with comparing the two weapon systems. And so, does that present a difficulty for it to hit, to thrive in the civilian market? And do you think there is future survival for the 5.56 AK in the civilian market?
I think that we're worried about a wrong problem because out there are people who collect post stamps, and that's a great hobby. And I wonder when they buy another post stamp, do they like, oh, this is the best post stamp ever? Like it beats all the other post stamps. And like if shit hits the fan, this post stamp is going to help me to survive. No, they're just collecting post stamps and they're enjoying it. And I think a lot of people should admit that we're not always buying a new gun because it's the best and it's the best thing on the market. We're buying it because we're enjoying it. We want to have it. We want to have it in our collection. And this is something we're interested in, whatever. And every new gun you buy doesn't have to be the best. It just has to be something that brings joy into your life. And I think that's a very important thing that a lot of people forget because we're lucky to have a hobby where our collectibles are actually useful. We're not collecting something, I don't know, statues, and you don't have to explain your desire to buy a certain gun. You think it's a good idea, you want it, you like it, you buy it. You don't have to convince every single person you meet that it's the best purchase out there. I think that AKs, as long as there are people who want to use AKs, there is future for AKs. For me personally, I do love the Air platform. I used it, I trained on it, I inspected it, I repaired it. It is good. It is probably not the best platform Eugene Stoner ever created. He didn't create Air 15 and say that's it. That's the pinnacle of human evolution. I'm never developing any more guns. It is just circumstantially this gun became very very effective. Does it have flaws? Yes. Once in Iraq I saw an AR-15 that was basically snapped in half on the barrel nut. I've never seen that happening with an AK. So in terms of durability, I guess AK has a little bit of an edge. But if you're not an idiot, you're not going to break your AR-15 in half. And there are certain consideration of the winter and stuff like that. But what really bothers me is this one tendency that we see. When I was 8 years old, I really liked guns, and I was reading gun books. I didn't have access to real guns, so we had a game with my cousin. He would show me the picture, of a gun, and say like, tell me what its name and the country of origin. I was like, oh, this is German MP5, and I just imagine my kids playing the same games. Like, oh, this is AR-15 from U.S. Oh, this is AR-15 from Finland. Oh, this is AR-15 from Italy. We're losing this variety. We're losing this amazing variety of different designs, of different design philosophies, of different schools, and everything is an AR-15. And it is a good platform, but if you're not exploring the alternatives, if you're not using the alternatives, you're losing a lot. And when something is like the drone warfare right now, when small arms are used as the personal air defense tool, and you have a completely new set of challenges. And if you have just one weapon platform in the entire world, when this new challenge is going to come, this one weapon platform might not be able to address this challenge. So I love to see variety. I love to see Air 18 variants. I love to see Air 15 variants. I love to see AK variants. I love to see bullpups, because maybe we will be at some time in our development in a position where we need a long barrel, and the only way to have a long enough barrel is to have a bullpup. And yeah, so as long as people who want to enjoy shooting an AK will exist, AKs will be relevant. Is it the best platform for everything all the time? No, but I don't think there is a platform that's best for everything all the time, because again, it was in Somalia, and like, people are using Chinese CF98 pistols because that's the only like new pistol that's available. Is it the best platform? No, but it's new. You have 9mm ammo, and you use it, and it goes boom when you pull the trigger. So when you're carrying it around Mogadishu, this is the best gun for you. And when you go home, there's something different.
So it's an interesting take on it, and there's so last week Josh and I published the PSA AK-74 video, and one thing that, and I still believe the PSA AK-74 kind of hits the worst of both worlds. It's not collectible, and it uses a cartridge that is difficult for Americans to get, and it's situated in America. So if you broke one of those, like if you were able to drop these in I don't know, Armenia, somewhere that uses 545, Mongolia, and they could have weapons easily, and this is the cheapest AK-74 they can have. It doesn't matter if it was poorly made. It shoots the cheapest ammunition. You would still sell a lot of it. The fact that it hits all of these nodes makes it really difficult. So the AK in 556, at least it breaks the that death triangle of the PSA 74, of it being non-collectible, difficult to find ammunition, and frankly, the AK in 556, you can actually have both, in my opinion, because kind of like what we showed right here. Yeah, I mean, Type 84 pre-ban is going to be very expensive here in the US because of how rare they are. A Galil, there are repro Galils or parts kit Galils. I'm not talking about the Galil Ace. I'm talking about the older SAR and the ARMs, where you could have something that is historically significant and still feed it, and I guess I will say vibe on the range and enjoy history and enjoy collecting something that is a little bit more interesting than someone said the AR-15 is like the Toyota Camry, and I agree with them on that. The AK is kind of like driving a vehicle, like a standard stick shift Mustang down the road. It's not the most efficient, but it's enjoyable. And I think the 556 AK has that going for it. But the big question is the AK's nature. The AK by nature is designed for a large government to issue, for organizations to issue. And I guess I could have popped this out earlier. Does that mean that it's unsuitable for civilian use, or does that put it at a less, does it make it less desirable for civilian use?
I would say that it's, as civilians, we should be exploiting uh, good and bad sides of governments doing making decisions. So again, if I think it's irrelevant, and as a civilian gun owner, you have, at least in the U.S., you have incredible opportunities, and you can try to exploit whatever governments are doing, and actually have a choice. So I think it's really. I don't think the nature of AK makes it any worse, any less suitable. It just makes it more interesting and more collectible because you just have this incredible story connected to so many guns, and that's for me. That's what matters. I wanna know those stories. I wanna hear those stories because the guns themselves, they are incredible artifacts. And when we go to any museum, you will see swords, you will see bows, whatever, because the weapons always tell the story, and we just need to know how to read those stories when we look at weapons.
So what I'm picking up from that, Vlad, that it is okay to go and enjoy the swords at the museum with your friends and shoot bows and arrows at each other to enjoy history.
Well, shooting at each other, bows and arrows. I mean, I'm not gonna tell somebody not to enjoy something. But I certainly wouldn't love to be. I would not be open to those things. I've never been shot with an arrow. I think it's quite unpleasant.
Uh, Josh sent over the poll results that he ran. He asked, what is your purchasing in this space typically driven by? Enjoyment or hobby, or practicality or performance? And 68% of the people who voted said enjoyment or hobby. And 32% of the people who voted said practicality or performance. So it would seem that within this small sample of people, that it skews not entirely, but mostly towards the enjoyment and hobby side for people who are shooting 5.56 AKs.
I think you just have very good audience because people actually admitting that they enjoy it and they buy things because they enjoy them. Because the other way around, just trying to convince everybody that your every purchase is strictly practical. I think this is just a lie people tell to themselves because, like, if you're just thinking about practical stuff, why do you even need a rifle? Just get a pistol and whatever. But you need a rifle because you can and you should. There is if you live in a free country.
Okay, so now we are at the 2 hour mark on this live stream, and we are going to end it with some Q&As. Now, you guys can drop as many Q&A questions into the chat. Please go do your thing with your quick fingers. Don't be dirty with that, please. Drop your questions into the chat. For now, I do have some questions that I had pulled from our patron and Pepperbox side that the viewers had. And I know I'm going to start with an easy but a toughie. Basic question: what is Vlad's favorite AK, either in history or build that you've shot? Another follow-on that: do you have a favorite manufacturer? Or I don't think you have a builder because you're not here in the U.S. of A doing that, or maybe you do. So
Yeah.
question.
First, favorite AK, and again, I'll have to choose between practicality and enjoyment. I'm going to choose enjoyment. There was this one Type 3 AK from I like to imagine it was like the first batch of Type 3s ever made at the Ijevsk factory back when I worked there. And it was 1955, like not a normal serial number. And for me, that was such an incredible artifact because the Type 3 is what started this international proliferation. It was Type 3 blueprints that were transferred to a bunch of countries, Hungary, Poland, and many more. And essentially, this is, for me, that's the gun that started this international phenomenon because Type 1, Type 2, that's incredible. It's very interesting, but they were not produced outside of Russia. And the quality of this thing was incredible. And I was 2014 or 2015, and I had a modern 545 and this Type 3, and I shot them side by side, and the accuracy was identical. So the 7.62 was so accurate, made in 1955 with all the craftsmanship, that it was shooting as well as the as some 5.45 that I was testing at the time. So I love that gun, and it's just, I had more historical guns like 1948 prototypes in my hands, and we couldn't shoot because there was no extractor. But that Type 3, that's something that I really loved. So coming back to the, not coming back, addressing the second question, does he have favorite manufacturers or builders that he would recommend? I'm probably going to talk about it a lot more in my maybe next book. All manufacturers have problems. All manufacturers, even manufacturers that I thought would not have problems, they do have problems. When it comes to builders, I've been to Rifle Dynamics, I've been to M13. I was very impressive. It was great. I'm sure it's still wonderful. But the problem is the quality can, especially with individuals, can fall pretty fast. The guy gets in a fight with his wife. She takes his house. He starts smoking crack under the bridge, and the quality of his AKs is dropping rapidly. So I would not, I'm not qualified to recommend someone now. I love both Rifle Dynamics and M13, but it's been a while since I visited them. What I see on Instagram is very, very, very impressive.
So I would say
Jim Fuller's stuff as well, because I met him there. But again, I didn't see his new facility. His guns were very impressive.
Yeah, so RD, Josh and I have been to RD, and it's a cool place. It definitely is. They have a really neat reference collection as well. I would say, however, and I've said this in the past, I don't know if I've said it in public, the American builder market is very similar to what you would see in the Khyber Pass area, except that we are fueled by methamphetamine, monsters, and gun bunnies and Instagram. It's surprising the talent that both sides have, and I'm not saying that we're a bunch of. Let's just put it down.
They can be a topic for the next video, because I've been both at those builders and in Khyber Pass workshops, so we can compare.
It's amazing the degree of creativity and the degree of craftsmanship that exists on both sides, and lack thereof as well. Lack thereof on creativity and craftsmanship. It is the Wild West. It's talking about builders, it is a very difficult one to recommend because, like you said, they don't have the same QC as let's say like Radon, like FB Radon has. They don't have the same QC as some other large factories would have, and oversight. So also they don't have the regulations that hold them back from doing something truly spectacular and original. So it's difficult. That's a difficult one to talk about. Let me see. Oh my, we have people who actually enjoy methamphetamine in the chat. Okay, so this is one that has been reoccurring. This is a question that's been reoccurring. Did KK do anything with the firing pin and firing pin channel for it to work with 5.56? Because a lot of people seem to have issues with 5.56 AKs that pile up metal on the primers. And on that, specifically on the PSAs, that what we've seen in the PSA is the firing pin hole was a little bit wider than we would like, and it would suck in some of those firing pin, some of the primer material in there. Now, I will say from an ordnance side, from an ammo guy side, it's one thing using primarily military ordnance or ammunition, and they use a very strict control over the primer specs. When it comes to commercial civilian primers or ammunition components, it is the sky is the limit. Josh corrected me right here. Sorry, that was a PSA 545. So that was a completely different story on this. But I've seen in more than one account people asking about the 556 AKs having firing pin and firing pin channel issues, that it would suck up some of the primers. And so I'll leave it to you. Do you know anything about this?
As far as I know, there were no major modifications to like 101, 102. I personally never I mean, I didn't experience it with 556 AKs. There were instances of kind of the same problem with, I think, Pakistani ammunition and various battle rifles in 7.62 by 51. But personally, I never experienced this problem. I'd love to know more. But it was never something that I saw. So I am afraid I'm completely useless when it comes to this particular question.
I think part of this too, when it comes to non-TDP transfer items, the sky is a limit on what you can do, and also the sky is a limit on what you can do wrong in a non-TDP setup. So when I'm saying, again, our version of Khyber Pass gunsmiths who are fueled by monsters and gun bunnies and boobies on Instagram, most certainly, the sky is a limit on what they could do right and do wrong. And I would be curious, chats out there, someone saying that the Bulgarian AK-101s, which I think he's talking about the ARM-1s because they didn't have the 101s in Bulgaria, had issues. WBP is a civilian rifle manufacturing facility, so that is separate from FB Radom. My question to the chat is, if you've experienced issues with the AK-556 eating primers, was that a civilian AK or was that a military AK? Because I know from working with the Poles a lot, that was not a common issue with the Polish military. As far as I've seen, I don't know. I wasn't a Polish armorer, so I can't speak for them, but that did not seem to be an issue that anyone ever brought up, that the barrel would eat primers. In fact, it was boringly reliable, is what I heard from my counterparts in the Polish army. So let's see. Kay is asking, there seems to be an increasingly common sentiment in the West that AKs are dépassé compared to modern ARs. And how would you respond to this argument? You kind of responded to this earlier. You want to say it in like one or two phrases so they can catch it?
Yeah. You see, I do not know the exact definition of dépassé, but I guess
it's a past tense. It's a past tense. It's past its peak.
SIG 550 series, are they bad guns? Tell me.
I mean,
they're good guns. They're great guns. They're just not around anymore. Why? Because of reasons that do not have anything to do with their performance. And the same thing is happening with AKs. So I think that we should be aware of all the geopolitical circumstances, but at the same time, it should not cloud our judgment when it comes to weapon system. SIG 550, I think, is amazing. And the fact that it's not very popular does not make it worse as a gun. Maybe people who are in charge of marketing it and selling it are not that good, but the gun is great. And the same thing is happening with AKs, and I think the same thing is happening to so many different guns out there. It's the circumstances. It's not the actual performance of the gun that determines how popular it is at a certain point in time.
My thought on this, though, Vlad, I think the U.S. commercial market has brought in so many different options for the AR and alternatives for the AR. And in a weird way, now you've got like production in Schmeisser in Germany. Let's talk about China, the CQ ARs, the Chinese clone of the M4. The AR-15 is also not only produced in the U.S., surprise. And the fact that the AR also has a plethora of aftermarket components that's easily bolted on, I think I think that also presents itself in an entirely different type of sort of ability that the AR has that the AK does not. And it's not down to the performance of the AR versus the AK. It's more so towards the development, towards the in the US aftermarket environment that's given so many different options that frankly were not developed as well in for the AK. I mean, what do you have? You have the what's the Israeli firm that's really known for TDI. What else? There's a couple firms out in Israel that's
Sure
famous
Shot
for AK components.
Armament and
Sure shots a big one out of Russia.
Zenitco and copies of Zenitco. Oh, I mean, it's out there. All the upgrades are out there. I personally use Sure Shot Armament. They're great. Again, but there is a question of a price point. But then again, you start thinking like you only need all that stuff if you're using lasers. And again, I just want people to enjoy their hobby. If you buy an AK and makes you happier, great. If you buy an AR and makes you happier, wonderful. If you buy a Mauser and it makes you happier, my Mauser is the best gun for you. I wrote this article with a very controversial idea. Like we were in Florida with a friend of mine years ago, and he wanted my advice on buying a good practical pistol. So we bring him in, or like M&P Shield. This is exactly what you need, and there is no spark in his eyes. I'm like, okay, Glock 43 just came out at the time. And the shop owner gives his Glock like, hey, do you want to go and shoot it? And there is no spark in this guy's eyes. And he finds a short-barreled 45 caliber Kimber. And he's so happy, like a child. And I tell him, buy this freaking Kimber. Because you're gonna you like it, you're gonna buy a holster for it, you're gonna buy ammo for it, you're gonna go and shoot with it because you're gonna feel cool. And if you buy an M&P or a Glock, you're just gonna put it in the safe and never touch it again. So get this Kimber, even though it's a horrible gun for the first-time gun owner. So just buy something that you like, and you don't feel like you're obligated to explain your choices to anybody.
Excellent. So this one is, let's see, this is on the main Patreon site. Are there any modifications to the rifle specific to 5.56 that we don't see with the 5.45, excluding the magazine and bolt face? You kind of answered this earlier.
I would just say you have more ammo. Just you have more ammo choice. So go and explore it. Maybe you're going to find this incredible, fantastic ammo that shoots half a minute of angle. Probably not, but you're going to have fun, fiddling with it. So other than that, everything's pretty much the same in my experience.
Okay, now off to some Pepperbox questions. And this Robinson's saying that he's going to ruffle some feathers. His question, are there many AK issues plaguing AKs? Are many of the AK issues plaguing 5.56 AKs really a matter of improper manufacturing/design, or an obsession with cheap, surplus, otherwise inconsistent ammo choices for AKs? He's been asked, why would you run brass to his face at a competition before? And now he understands that the guy was joking, but the association is very prevalent online. Another one similar to it, since we're talking about
let's deal with the first one because
sure.
First of all, this is a very good question about brass, because I heard that AKs don't work with brass ammo and you must use steel cased ammo. So the Russian factory is using brass cased S109 to test AK-101, 201, and stuff like that. So AKs work with brass cased ammo perfectly well. Yugoslavia produced brass case ammo and no steel cased ammo. So yeah, I think we just forgetting that the good times never last. 545 was really cheap, and it just when people talk about oh, you can buy an AK in Africa for price of a chicken. I guess that's not the reality. That was the reality when those guns were dumped there for free. All the war zones I've been to, all the unstable countries I've been to, when asked about the prices were always very close to what you would see in the US or whatever. And realistically, yeah, cheap 545 was available. It didn't last forever. Yeah, now we have to deal with it. So, and people just cannot comprehend the fact that the good times are over, and we need to look for opportunities if we still want to, enjoy our hobby.
All right.
To the second
Let's
question.
see. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. I would say
Yeah.
so. Your comment on well, the AKs are sold so cheap in Africa. Why is it not cheap here? Well, sir, go ahead and import your cheap AK from Africa. See
And
how
they're
much it
not
costs.
cheap there anymore. They're not cheap there anymore. You have to be in a very specific place in a very specific time, and when there's free shit, and then when people bring it to their homes and they go on the internet, and nothing is cheap anymore. Let me tell you. And the second question, I just want to say thanks to the guy because, like, because I never understood why people have been against 5.56 and AK other than purity, and I completely agree. There is not much difference between 545 and 556 in terms of actual effectiveness. And I just don't see it's like, uh, liking steaks and not liking ribeye. Like, what's the point? Like, I like everything, but I don't eat ribeye. Okay, good for you, but it's weird.
All right, so these are going to be a little bit. Let's go through these a little faster because we're at the
Yeah.
tail end of our time that we have
Oh, yeah,
left.
yeah, yeah.
Is it TDP difficult to acquire from post-Soviet countries?
I think it's the same situation as with gun laws. Once you make something difficult, people just do it illegally because I've never seen a TDP being like sold officially. But then somehow you come to Turkey and every other firm makes an AK, and they get it from somewhere. I don't know exactly where. I think that a lot of stuff is just on the internet, but I'm sure they acquire it somewhere. So I guess it's you better go to Turkey and ask them because they get it from somewhere.
And
Next
then
question.
okay, this one. Okay, so
That's for you.
Unfortunately, I'm unfamiliar with BWK 92 and drilling out 7.62 barrel blanks. I'll try to address that later on in our organic publications. However, what's up with the Norinco versus Polytech 223 mag incompatibility? So to hammer the comment a little bit more, remember the Norinco and Polytech. What we were saying, these are export firms. These are not. They don't set the actual. They could set the requirements and parameters on what they want factories to build, but at the end of the day, they are not the factory itself. So when they're going around and gathering products from different factories to export and things like that, it comes down to the factory to make said 223 AKs magazine and come up with a pattern of the 223 AKs magazine. And so, unlike some of the other countries in producing their AK, their 5.56 AKs, let's say the Polish, they have FB Radom. The Russians, you have Ishmash. Did Malot do any 5.56? I think they did with the Beckers, right?
Probably, yeah, they did.
So, I mean, these other places are very concentrated on the manufacturing location, whereas, China, yeah, you had the Type 56, which is a standard magazine, so that was a standard set for the Chinese military. But anything beyond that was kind of sky's the limit, So I think it's interesting because you have to really delve into the nature of these entities and how they manufacture and how they export. And I think that itself is a very interesting take on the AK, because while it's all unified by the general design of the Kalashnikov system, the degree of variations of the AK is immense. I don't think there is another set of weapon system who has that degree of variation of of an AK. And so, on that note, I do think that that lends it to become very difficult for aftermarket manufacturers to make stuff for the AK because of the different degrees of pattern. I mean, excluding the Chinese stuff, which you can't get Chinese stuff here, you can get SDM stuff in Europe, but not here in America. Sure Shot Russia, the Sure Shot rail that's on my AK, the AK9er, is a Russian Sure Shot rail. Rock solid, bomb proof, one of the best iterations of aftermarket rails for AKs. Sure Shot USA, on the other hand, had to deal with a lot of the lack of standardization issues. So Sure Shot Russia specifically is made for the AK100 series, whereas Sure Shot USA omitted some of the design specs that Sure Shot Russia had, and that was a deliberate choice for it to fit into many different types of AKs that exist in the US. That puts us in a situation to where then the Sure Shot rail is not, specifically the Mark III chassis, is not holding zero like the original design is specified for it to, because some of the internal specs have already changed on how it was produced. That's just the nature of AKs. It is. I also think that variation of AKs is what makes it interesting for collectors. It makes it interesting for people who want to learn about these different nations, but it also makes it really difficult for it to thrive the way the AR-15 thrived. And that's just kind of the nature of it, in my opinion.
That is definitely something we can, because I was actually quite impressed the first time I encountered the magic of mil spec, but that's a story for another time. Yeah. Do we have any more questions?
I think those are the general questions right here. I do, however, so we do have if you guys sneak anything in, see if I could pop anything through. But I did want to take this time to draw your attention back to Vlad's new book that's coming up, From the Balkans to Babylon. How this is the story of how the Yugo pattern AK ended up in Iraq, and specifically under Saddam. And on the silhouette right there, the one that was one of my favorite Babylonian Iraqi AK pattern rifle, in my opinion, is got to be the Tabuk. I have an affinity to DMRs, however, but the Tabuk is a very interesting rifle, and I'm sure it is being covered, since it's especially on the cover. Yeah. We talk about it at great length. I had some insides of the book that you guys could sort of look at, and this is interesting, seeing some peacekeepers.
Yeah. It was one of the first deployments of M21, and Miles Whining. Actually, this book is, in a way, not just mine. There are people who know more than me who contributed an immense amount of information, photos, and their stories. And for me, that's what makes it special, because it doesn't matter how much experience I have. It's impossible for one person to know everything. So there is a lot of contributors in the book that wrote their own little stories connected to Zostima and Tabuk, and for me, just it was a very important part of working on the book, because you cannot possibly cover everything. You want those little emotional moments, people's experiences, and that's what I enjoy reading, and that's what I try to write.
And huge. I love that you have Miles in this book. I mean, huge shout out to Miles, one of the guys with the biggest hearts. And to be honest, I mean, there was a lot of people who didn't know him were talking about Miles. Oh, why is he talking like this? And thinking that he's this or that. 110%. That is one of the hardest dudes I've met, and been through some of the craziest war stories that I've ever heard in my life. So, Miles Vining, if you're out there, I know you're out there. I miss you. I hope to see you around. Let me see. I'm just going to do a once over just to see if we have anything that we should pop open before we end this feed. Let's see. So there was a Vepr 223.
Yeah.
How do you get an AEM5 or an OCM5 on your AK? We cover that in the AK Niner series. Go on to YouTube and Google AK Niner, N-E-I-N-E-R. N-I-N-E-R, sorry. Not nine or N-E-I. AK Niner, as it's spelled. Sorry about that. Indeed, the Chinese did reverse engineer all kinds of weapons. In fact, we've also talked about the Type 85 Dragunov. We showed my M21, which has a Polytech base M14 that copied the M14 better than Springfield was able to here in the US. See. I have not heard of this. Do you know about this? I know the CQ, the CQs
yeah,
are...
CQs are in production, and they actually transferred the technology from China to Sudan. Normal Sudan, not South Sudan. But North Korea, I'm not aware of their story.
Let's see. So the CQ, okay, that's Vlad, maybe this is a topic for a different time. The Chinese copy weapons are certainly really interesting because they've copied the M249, the M2 Browning, 240 Bravo. They copied all sorts of weapon systems that's in the Western arsenal. The 226, the P226 pistol, that's a big one that we like to fling around too. And a lot of times they copy it to an extent that you can actually use the original weapons components in the copy weapon. Like that's the degree of copy that the degree that they can copy these weapon systems. And it's actually turned into a sort of a destabilizing factor in the geopolitical arms market in the world. So not for this live stream, but maybe for a different live stream, it would be interesting specifically delving into the Chinese clone weapon systems that are out there.
Yep.
I'm sure you run into plenty in Africa.
Oh,
too.
yeah. In Pakistan, they were everywhere. So we can maybe do something about cloning and copying altogether, trying to look at different countries who copied weapons.
Tufu. Definitely not blanks to Babylon. It is Balkans to Babylon. Yeah. You should mention the AK. What am I thinking about? Sorry.
It's the future of Russian AK is a SIG 550, 560 philosophy. I have a hard time imagining the future of Russian AKs. We're definitely not at the point in history where it's easy to imagine anything regarding Russia's future or Russian military-industrial complex future. So there was a project AKV521, but it didn't go anywhere for now. So I don't know. I don't think there is any indication that would be the future of Russian AKs, but it's really not. It's a pretty good idea. It's a pretty good design.
This is your
never gotten the attention or the AK pattern has. Because again, there's geopolitical circumstances. AK-12 was really like more or less went into production in 2019, 20. So yeah, COVID, war. So it's just a matter of what's going on in the world.
Okay. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our live stream. Vlad, any last words? Josh, can you are you able to hop? I don't know if you are or not. No, he's saying no. Josh is not. Josh, for all you know, Josh could be butt naked in his location. So since he is not hopping on, I will allow you to imagine. But Vlad, you and I are not. Do you have any last words, any thoughts?
I'm just happy to have this opportunity. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope we're going to be able to talk about some other topics in the future. And it was great. It was a great way for me to reminiscent about some of the stuff that I've seen because I actually forgot a lot of stuff and like preparing for this little video. I was like, oh, that happened. Oh, this happened. I have no memory of that, but thankfully there are some videos and notes and stuff like that. So I hope we'll be able to do it again, and maybe the community will help us to find the questions that we should ask each other and ourselves to maybe share some of the knowledge that we have, and maybe the community will share some knowledge they have, and overall we'll be spreading the knowledge without any prejudice towards 556 AKs or any other weapon systems that do not deserve the prejudice they get.
We're all against prejudices here, right? Now, at the end of this segment, I would like to thank everybody who's commented. Sorry we couldn't get to everybody's comments. We try really hard to pull out as many good comments as possible. I will highlight out there that I'd invite you to join us at I'm not going to do the whole spiel, but I'd invite you guys to join us at Patreon or Pepperbox. Especially Patreon opens you up to joining us on the Discord, where we have lively debates on firearms technology and development. But if you had any further questions, drop them down in the comments right here. This is going to live on for for perpetual existence as long as YouTube shall have us. Patrons, if you do have any direct questions, please feel free to continue to ask them to us. We will get to them. For everybody out there, thank you for your support. Thank you for being around for this lively conversation. And we shall see you guys on the ranch.
716 is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel 96, this is 716, roger, over. 16, Steel 91, 1 pack, green, over. This is 716, roger, over.
16, Steel 92, 1 Victor, 2 packs, Redcon